All right. Hello, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I have put a link in the chat and I will paste it there again for anybody who has just joined
Luckily,
us.
it's very similar to like a beery almost. Yeah. Like it was just like matching.
Oops. All right. So I posted a link in the chat. Please use that to sign in to this webinar. Our webinars are sponsored by the Colorado Department of Education, so it is important that we know who is here so we can accurately report to them. So please use that link in the chat to get signed in. And with that, let's go ahead and get started with our SWAC October webinar, Mounting Assistive Technology to Wheelchairs. We are very fortunate to have Michelle Lang with us. Michelle is an occupational therapist, an assistive technology professional, a seating and mobility specialist with over 38 years of experience in the field. She's nationally and internationally renowned speaker, author, a RESNA fellow, and a member of the Clinician Task Force. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. I will pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. And I know Claire's busily muting anyone, but if you haven't muted yourself, please do so. Otherwise, too much background noise with all these wonderful people joining. So thank you very much for joining us. I know everyone's super busy and that it takes effort to carve out this time, but I really do hope this information is helpful to you, to the clients that you work with. So let's jump on in.
No, I'm just saying we're doing more.
All right, so you heard a little bit about who I am. That's the formal introduction. The less formal is that if I actually have spare time on my hands, I actually like doing some yard work. Right now, there's so many leaves that I'm sending my son out there to do yard work. And I like eating chocolate. And I'm a James Bond fan. So there you go. But I'd like to know a little bit about you guys. So if you could, in the chat box, maybe indicate your discipline, whether you are an OT, a PT, SLP, or something that I haven't listened or listed, that would be great. Give people a second to do that. And while people are doing that, we have a handout today. I think you should have a PDF of this PowerPoint, but also a comparison of the various mounting systems that are on the market. And of course, it's always up to some change, but it's pretty current right now. Great, so lots and lots of different specialties coming in. Thank you. Now I have another question for you, and I want to know if any of you have a specific goal, something you want to make sure we get out of this session here today, because even though this PowerPoint has been written, I really want to make sure we focus on what's going to be most helpful to you. And again, in extension, the clients that you work with. So I'll keep an eye out if anyone is going to put in those specific goals they have. And well, okay, great. Oh, I might have to take note of a few of these so that I can remember. So mounting on a Riften activity chair. Ooh, that's a tall order. And access mounting eye gaze. Yep, we're going to do that. Great. Thank you for those goals. All right. I'll keep an eye on that as we move forward. We do have learning objectives for this course that you can see here. Mounting on Riften gait trainer. We're getting tougher here. That's a need, though. Something we have to address. So thank you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started in our terminology, but if you haven't had a chance to put your goals in there yet, feel free, and I'll keep an eye on those. So we're going to start with what the team roles are when we're looking at mounting assistive technology to a wheelchair and some of the terminology that is used. So we can mount a number of different things to a wheelchair, and that's what we're focusing on today. We will try, if we have time, to also get to mounting on these other devices like an activity chair, a gait trainer, a walker. But mounting to a wheelchair, we can mount heavier or lighter speech generating devices, those SGDs, right? And lighter in this case usually falls into that less than 5 pound category. We can also mount computers, and that includes notebook computers, or what I call my laptop, as well as tablets. And we can also mount smartphones. So whose job is this in terms of recommendation? Who recommends the mounting system? Partly it has to do with funding. So in general, depending on the funding source, if the speech language pathologist orders a mount with a device, then the speech language pathologist needs to spec this out. They need to complete all the information that's required for the order, all the parts and pieces. If the wheelchair supplier orders the mount, and this might happen particularly if they are also recommending a wheelchair, they might put in the order. Sometimes it's the OT or PT. The therapist may determine the optimal placement of that speech generating device or other assistive technology device. The access method that someone's going to use to control that, because that's going to dictate the placement of the device a little bit, and then what the actual mounting system is. So as you can see, this is hopefully a team approach because all three may be involved in this ordering process in making the recommendation. When it comes to the actual, I'm submitting the paperwork and getting funding approval, then if the mount is ordered with the speech generating device, funding may be covered for both. So there might be funding for the communication device, the SGD, and the mounting system. So that would be usually something the speech pathologist would do. If the mount is ordered with a new wheelchair frame, then the wheelchair supplier may order the mount or at least a new frame clamp. So perhaps this person already had a mount. They're getting a new wheelchair frame. They might need a new frame clamp. The mount might still work with the new frame clamp on that chair. If the mount's ordered all by itself, this person already has a speech generating device, they already have a wheelchair, then whoever is pursuing the funding or is able to pursue funding may order it. So it can really vary. Now, who holds the Allen wrenches? Typically, it's whoever ordered the mount. So the wheelchair supplier often knows how to put a mount on, but if they didn't pursue the funding, then they usually won't put the mount on. Part of that even has to do with liability, not just lack of time and lack of cooperation. They don't want to be liable for something that they didn't even order. Mounting is usually too difficult for a lot of people, but it's too difficult for the client or the caregivers to do. So we don't want this to show up on their porch in a box. Whoever attaches the mounting system has to be competent. It needs to be put on correctly and assumes liability if there's any problem, particularly if that mount slips or pivots into the client. That can be a lot of leverage coming towards the client, or even if a device falls off of the mount onto the floor, probably cement with my luck, and that can be quite costly. And whose responsibility is that? All right, so we're going to have a little poll here. If you work with clients using mounting systems on their wheelchair, who is recommending the equipment at your location? Is it the speech language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, or the equipment supplier? So put a number in the chat box. It's always fun when you can't pronounce speech language pathologist in front of a bunch of speech language pathologists. That is not my best skill. All right, so we have a variety here. We have a lot of speech language pathologists, equipment suppliers, got OT and PT, so we have a little of everything. Great, thank you. And I think it's also going to just depend on your setting. I think a lot of this also depends. Thank you. We have a few that are all of those. I think it's going to depend also on who has that competence in your particular location. All right. Let's get into some terminology. That sounds exciting, but it's important that we are on the same page. And when we are speccing out this equipment, mounting this equipment, instructing people in how to use the equipment, that we're trying to use the same phrasing here. So first we have the frame clamp. So here's a picture of a wheelchair. This is from Daisy, and you can see the frame clamp, the tubing and joints, and the mounting plate. So let's start with the frame clamp. So this attaches to the frame. It's the only place where the mount actually is attached to the frame, and it's designed to fit a specific frame shape and diameter. Usually round, but we have some very unusual frame shapes out there. And the diameter is certainly not consistent between frames. Hence, if somebody gets a new wheelchair, they often will need, at the very least, a new frame clamp. Then we have horizontal and vertical sections of tubing with or without joints. So here we have a joint right above this particular arrow, and we have another joint. So depending on the clamp, these often kind of resemble your arm, where we might have adjustments at the shoulder, elbow, and wrist in order to get the exact placement we want. So these tubes, the length of the tubes, the angles of the tubes in relation to each other, how many tubes they are, dictate the final placement and position of the mount, and ultimately what is mounted to it. We then have the mounting plate, and that is what connects the mount to the assistive technology device. Sometimes there's a special adapter that's required on the back of the device that slips into that mounting plate, interfaces with it. And Readapt happens to call this a different name than most other manufacturers. So instead of mounting plate, they call it a universal device socket. Socket meaning it connects to something else, like directly to the back of a device or that plate in between. So if you hear universal device socket, think mounting plate. So speech generating devices must have an adapter plate that's either already on the device or it is ordered separately and connected to the device. So some of these have it built in and some do not. And it connects this adapter plate to the mounting plate. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing because Readapt calls this piece the adapter plate. So you can see here from Daisy, we have the device adapter plate that attaches to the back of the device. And then over to the right is the actual mounting plate that it connects into. It slides right in there, and there's a locking feature that makes sure it's nice and secure when it's connected. So mount recommendation, ordering, attachment to the wheelchair base, all of this can require very much team approach. And it's important to clarify rules for your particular team. And if there is not someone who's super familiar with this stuff on your team, it's important to identify that person who's interested or maybe not so interested and say, we've got to have someone on our team who's competent in this and develop those skills. It's also important to understand the components of the mounting system so that you can order it and configure it properly for the final recommendation. And that is going to really make a difference as to whether the client can be successful with their device or not. So I'm going to take a break here just for a second to see if anyone has any questions at this point. I'm just going to scroll down our chat box. We've got lots of input from you guys. Thank you so much. So any questions about what we've covered so far? If we had enough time, you could ask a James Bond trivia question. But not seeing any questions right now. If you're typing, please keep typing. I'm going to keep going, and we will pick up your questions at the next break here for questions. So now we're going to move into assessment. What do we need to keep in mind if we're recommending a mounting system? Well, first of all, why in the world do we even mount to wheelchairs? Part of the reason this is important is we need to understand why we're recommending this stuff. But these reasons for why are also our justifications for funding. So if I can explain to the funding source, I need to recommend this mount so that this person can visually regard it, or for security reasons, because we don't want this very expensive device falling and breaking. We don't want someone walking away with this device. This is always very frustrating in our field, but I've certainly worked with a number of clients, I hope you have not, who have had someone literally walk away with their device because it sure looks expensive. It is, but I don't think it sells very well at the flea market. Now, when something's mounted, we know what to do to release this device from the mount, but it seems to confound many of our potential thieves, and so that can help it to be less likely to walk away. Also, depending on the access method, mounting is particularly important, really for any access method, but where it's really critical is for direct access. I need to have this device in the place that the team decides is optimal for someone to reach out and touch the display. If I'm using a head mouse or eye gaze, the device has to be in an area where my eye movements or head movement are registered correctly by the device. So the placement is very, very important. With switch access, the exact placement of the device may not be as critical, but often the person still needs the device in front of them for visual regard, or even just to help their communication partners to see what they've been saying. So how do we get started? We need to identify the type of device we're mounting, where it's going to be placed in relation to the client, and then where we're going to place the mount on the frame, on the wheelchair frame, so that it can support the device in that specific location. So, device type. What device are we recommending? What mounting plate will be required to connect the device to the mount? So in this case, we have an eye gaze system, and there is a mounting plate right by my arrow, if you're able to see it, and it is connecting to the built-in device adapter on the back of this system. And then the whole thing is connecting to the horizontal upper bar of the mount. So what mounting plate will be required? So that's part of our order. And will a device adapter be required, or is it already built into the device? Then we need to choose an appropriate mounting category. Do we need a heavier duty mount or a lighter mount, depending on the weight and placement of the device? So device placement, we then have to determine where the device will be placed in relation to the client. We're not looking at the wheelchair yet, just while the client is in the wheelchair, optimally positioned. We don't want them slid way down in their seat. Want to have them in a great position. Then where do we place the device in relation to them? And that's for optimal visual regard as well as access. But also we want this within the boundaries or the footprint of the wheelchair so the device doesn't get bumped. So think about a wheelchair going through a doorway. If the farthest thing laterally to the side of the wheelchair is the edge of a speech generating device, it's going to take the hit. We don't want that to happen. That can cause damage. We also want to make sure that the device ideally is not blocking the client's view of their communication partner, of the front of the classroom, or where they are self-propelling a manual chair or driving a power chair. This is often a difficult dance where we might have to compromise and find where can the person still visually regard and access their device without us blocking their view of the world. Sometimes less typical placements are required. So this is Riley, and she uses her right foot to access her communication device. She also uses it to control the power wheelchair display. You can see she has great hip flexion here. So in this picture, she's actually using her foot at this moment to control the display, but she can come down and control a joystick on her right foot plate, as well as directly access everything on her speech generating device very, very well. She can drive perfectly fine with shoes on as well. So sometimes we have to put this in a less than typical placement. We need to keep that in mind when we're recommending a mount, so the mount can be can support this particular location, because they can't all do so. So here's just an example of device placement. This is Jessica. She lives in Delaware, actually, and she was successfully using eye gaze. However, she was positioned in significant posterior pelvic tilt. So think of your body, your bottom sliding way forward in your chair. Maybe some of you are sitting that way right now. And because she spent so much time in this position, she had a lot of back pain. She explained to us that she was sitting that way intentionally because she had to slide down in her wheelchair to use her eye gaze. We thought, oh my gosh, we can certainly take care of that for you. So we raised the mount, and she could sit upright. So she was not in a posterior pelvic tilt. Her posture was much better, helps everything in life. And she could both use her eye gaze as well. So she had improved posture, reduced pain, reduced pressure risk. We don't want someone sitting on their sacrum, and still had successful communication. After we did this, she laughed hysterically for a long time and kept telling us that she can't believe that no one ever thought that to raise her mount before. So sometimes solutions aren't really that hard. She didn't need a new device. She didn't need a new access method. She didn't need a new mount or a new chair. She just needed it raised. And fortunately, there was enough room on the bar to do so. Sometimes there's not. It's been cut off. Okay, then we have the mount placement. So we've talked about where the device goes in relation to the client. We've talked about the type of device and whether we need a mounting plate. Now we have to talk about where does that mount go on the wheelchair frame itself. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. We need to mount this above the tilt. So here on this chair, you can see the mounting is right on the seat rail. This is a really common spot. This is my favorite spot to place the mount if I can. If we had moved this down a level, it would be below the tilt. And every time this young lady tilted, her tray or her knees would have been running into the bottom of the device. She may no longer have been able to visually regard it. And she also might have lost her ability to access the device. So we want it above the tilt. We want to avoid movable parts like those footrest hangers, like the arm supports. So in this picture up above, this is actually attached, I believe, in this picture here to her footrest hanger, and we moved it further back to the seat rail. The footrest hanger, especially on a new chair, feels really nice and secure and seems like a great place for mounting. But over time, that huge leverage that we're placing on this mount due to the device being mounted so far away from the frame clamp will lead to that movable part, be it an armrest or a footrest hanger, and it will wiggle that loose. We don't want that to happen. And then we also have a trick of how do we mount around somebody's tray? In this case, in these pictures, this mount was able to sneak in right next to the tray. So the tray can still be placed on and off of the chair. The tray can be used at the same time of the mount. That doesn't always work. Sometimes we can do a cutout in the tray or use an offset bar that widens a bit so that it can clear the side of the tray. You just want to make sure it can still clear other things like a doorway. We also have to make sure the mount can move out of the way for transfers so that the client can get in and out of the chair. So we have different options. We have folding mounts, swing away, or we just simply remove the mount. And it's important to determine for this individual which is going to work best for them, which do they prefer, maybe what have they already been using. If the mount swings to the side, we have to make sure the base will not tip over from the weight of the mount and the device on it if that swing away is used during transfers, especially once the seating system is unweighted from the client. So if this is an adaptive stroller or a wheelchair, a manual wheelchair, often this will tip them to the side. So it's something to keep in mind. At the very least, the device usually needs to come off of the mount, swing that out of the way, transfer the client so this doesn't occur. Now, in terms of ordering, Ordering has become easier than it used to. So some of the mounting manufacturers actually offer some additional help, which is great. So for example, with Readapt and CJT mounting, if you hold the device where you want to in relation to the client and in relation to the wheelchair and take photos from several different directions, they will spec out exactly what you need. They'll send you a quote. They'll let you know, this is what we think it'll look like on this frame. They know just what frame clamp they need, what tubing sizes, whether or not an adapter place required, all of that. They'll send you the mounting quote. You can make sure that it looks good, and then you go ahead with the order and it shows up. So really awesome, awesome, awesome. I've gotten very spoiled with this myself. All right, another poll, because besides going through all this info, I want to keep you awake. So if you work with clients who use mounting systems on their wheelchairs, who actually mounts the equipment? Is it the speech language pathologist, the OT, the PT, or the supplier? And put those numbers in again. And some of you even have a additional option. Thank you. That's great. And sometimes it depends. Okay, good. And I see your question there, Hannah. We'll get to that towards the end. We're going to cover that. Okay. Great. So we have lots of different options here. Again, this often comes down to who is handy with tools and good at doing this mounting, but it's important to make sure there's someone on the team who feels comfortable mounting these and has the time to do that mounting. And ideally have more than one person, because what happens sometimes, I think, with teams is there's somebody who has a certain skill, whatever it might be, mobile arm supports or mounting or splinting or whatever it might be. And then that person might leave and no one else knows how to do that. So always good to have a backup as well. Make sure that more than one person is familiar. Okay, so in summary for assessment, placement of the assistive technology device provides optimal visual regard, security, and access, particularly if someone is using direct head mouse or eye gaze access. There's also a lot of considerations when determining the mount placement on the wheelchair frame. Remember to keep that device within the wheelchair footprint, above the tilt, avoid mounting to those movable parts like footrest hangers, and then determine how to best move the device and mount for transfers for that individual person. All right, I'm going to see if people have any more questions. And Hannah, again, I saw your question. Great question. We'll address that later. Okay, so Elizabeth, this is a great question. What do you do if there's not a spot on the frame to mount to? There's a couple scenarios where a mount won't work well on the frame. One of those is when the seating system is right on top of the seat rails. There's really no space between the top of the frame clamp and the seat itself. Several of these manufacturers have an option, and we'll see these as we go through some of the mounting options, that don't take as much real estate up on the frame. And so those can work really well. They can work even when the seat is literally sitting on the seat rail. So we'll definitely look at some of those options. The other problem is many of these frames have unusual frame shapes, and that's usually because of aesthetics. So they look really cool, but it makes mounting really difficult. So if you if you use one of these virtual assistance options, let's say with Readapt, they will recognize that frame and tell you if there's a spot they can mount or not. If their traditional frame clamp doesn't work, some of these manufacturers offer a more universal clamp. So if you think of a universal switch mount, that type of super clamp at the bottom, and again, we'll look at some of these pictures, will also be an option. It's not always strong enough for some of our mounting options, but there are some custom frame clamps available or universal frame clamps. And, oh, that's the situation with the student I work with. Okay, great. And then Hannah has said, we have a student with a very low profile wheelchair that she is starting to self-propel in. It appeared that any mount system would interfere with being able to use her hands to propel herself. Yeah, that's a good point. If someone's, say, in an ultralight chair, there's not a lot of frame there because we're trying to reduce the weight of everything, right? So in that case, there might not be a lot of real estate, and some of that real estate might be where her hands are self-propelling. We want to allow a lot of room. So there's different strategies, like with the wheel locks on those frames too, to tuck them out of the way. When they're not being used, the client's fingers won't run into them. So in that case, we really have to look at mounting further down. Now, a lot of those ultralight chairs have a footrest that's incorporated into the frame. So instead of swing away ones, and you can go ahead and let me know if she has swing away, Hannah, but if it's a rigid frame with incorporated footrests, you can mount further down in that area, and it should be away from her self-propulsion pattern. It's important if someone's a really good self-propeller to look carefully at where we're adding any weight on the frame, because center of mass is really important. They swing in, it's a rogue. Yeah. They swing in. So do you mean there's a non-swingable footrest area with a foot plate that flips up? Let me know. But in general, thanks for your comment there, Hannah. In general, if you're dealing with an ultralight chair, there's less frame to deal with. And if you do have integrated footrest hangers where they don't swing away, it's part of the frame, you could perhaps mount down there. But keep an eye on where that mass is in the chair. You don't want to put too much weight over those little casters. Okay. So let's get into some of these mounts, because this will help answer some of these questions. And again, you have a handout that is a comparison of these different mounting systems. Okay. So we have some heavier devices and we have smaller devices, and there's just some examples here. Obviously, there's more of these available. But it's important to keep in mind, is this a fairly lightweight device or is this really heavy? Because that's going to determine what mounting system that we use. So larger devices are bigger often, not only in weight, but also dimension. They just are larger in terms of the display. And that also needs to be accommodated by the mount. It has to have a long enough horizontal bar to place that device where it is required. Mounts used to have weight limits on them, but this is not very common anymore because there's so many different configurations. There's different ways clients use them too. So if someone's never touching their device or they're pushing with some force against it, maybe with direct access, that's going to all impact what that device can support. Devices that are accessed by eye gaze or head mouse usually are going to require heavier capacity mount, and it's simply because of the height requirements. So some of it could be weight, those are our larger devices, but that height requirement really increases the leverage on the mount. Some of our lighter weight mounts just can't mount something at that height or sustain that leverage. So something to keep in mind, if you have a bigger device, you're mounting it higher up, you might need these larger mounts. So let's look at some examples. We have the Mountain Mover from Blue Sky Designs. This has been around for a while and has had some continued design changes. It is very unique in that it allows the user to independently move the mount into various positions for transfers, but also for access. It can really be helpful with eye gaze technologies because sometimes the device isn't quite where it needs to be. Maybe the client's position has changed a little bit, and sometimes a very quick little change in height can make all the difference as the day progresses for this client. It supports a wide range of wheelchair frame sizes and a wide range of speech generating devices. It will hold up to 15 pounds. It also has a powered version, which is nice, so that someone could use a switch to swing this out of the way. So let's go ahead and take a look at a video, if you haven't seen Blue Sky before, to give you an idea of how this works.
The trouble with typical static wheelchair mounts, whether for speech devices or trays, is that they're immovable barriers that trap you, cut you off, and limit you. You depend on help constantly. Solution: the Mountain Mover from Blue Sky. Our movable mount frees you up to do more on your own. You can easily move it aside to wash your hands, pull up to a table to eat, see to drive your chair, and socialize. Multitask with multiple devices you can position exactly where you want. Move them to study, take pictures, watch TV, exercise, hug your kids, play with your dog, and go to bed all in your own time. Stay connected even in bed. Free up family and caregivers too. It comes in manual or power versions. With Blue Sky's Mountain Mover, the sky's the limit.
It's a nice little video they have. So these tend to be heavy and rather bulky on the frame. They have a larger frame clamp, so that's something to keep in mind to make sure it will fit onto the frame. And it does not fold down, but it does obviously swing out of the way. So you can see this little hoop here. The client or caregiver needs to grab onto that hoop, push downward slightly, and that allows it to be moved in more than one joint. So now we have articulation in more than one spot to get this where it is needed. Another option is from CJT, and they have the GT Enduro as well as the GT Enduro Angular. It fits most frames. There's a lot of options for placement on the frame. So if someone needs a really unusual placement, that frame clamp needs to be in a very atypical spot, this actually works very well. It supports a wide range of devices, and it has a max and light version. Max meaning you can get something up higher and heavier, and it will be able to support that. It is a rather heavy mount. It is bulky, and it has a very large frame clamp. You can kind of see it here, but it takes up a lot of real estate. Sometimes we don't have a lot of frame available to us, and so it's something to keep in mind. It also does not fold to the side, but it does swing out of the way. And then we have the Daisy series. These have been around for a long time, and they have a number of different options that actually haven't changed very much for a long time either. So they have a rigid version, and that's, let's see, it's not in one of these pictures. They have a folding version, which is, you can see in the upper right, this is folded to the side, nice tight, so that it makes the chair less tippy during transfers. They have a locking swing away, which is in the lower, I can do this, the lower left. And then they even have a rear folding and another mount they call a positioner mount that's kind of a hybrid. But let's take a closer look. They have a wide variety of frame clamps, including custom sizes, which is great if we're working with someone who has a really unusually sized frame, maybe shape or diameter. They have a locking clamp for tilt frames. This is really important. So as the client is tilting rearward, this particular mount, the Daisy mount, has a small pin that fits into a hole, and that can sometimes move out of position when someone is tilting, or even if they're going over rough terrain. So this locking clamp is something that I always order for clients who are using tilt, so that that can't happen. They also have a side clamp. Someone mentioned earlier about trying to put this on a difficult to fit frame. Here, this is a picture of this side clamp. It is completely flat on top. So if someone's seating system is sitting directly on this seat rail, that horizontal rail on the manual wheelchair or power wheelchair. This wraps around it, and then we attach the rest of the frame clamp here. It supports a lot of different devices, and there is a folding version. All of their clamps actually take up a very small amount of space on the frame, which is nice. They do tend to be heavy. And again, if you do not get the lock-in clamp, this little pin in the frame clamp can slip sometimes, especially during tilt. So if you look on the left, we have half of the clamp here with a little pin. And on the top right above it, we have the part that is on the vertical tubing. It has 3 little holes in it, and you can lift it slightly and turn it so that one of those holes fits on this little pin. But again, that can lead to it slipping. And on the right, you can see they have a different type of clamp here where we have this very different shape to help this stay in position and not pivot. But this blue handle here is the locking feature. So once you attach that, you turn the handle and it will not let that mount come off until you turn the handle again. Readapt has a number of different mounts. This is their Monty 3D. It's lighter weight than the other mounts in our heavy mount category. It fits most frames. It has a small frame clamp as well. It has limitless angles, so it's not dictated by where maybe a teeth sort of clamp is or a pin clamp. You can really loosen it and move it in 360 degrees. The tubes also flow through the joints, and that gives us even more adjustability. So if you look up at the top picture, and hopefully you can see my cursor here, we have a joint here, and that tube not only can be changed in angle, but part of the tube can be moved further through the joint or further forward. So we can, in essence, shorten or lengthen tubes to get it just where we need. So it's very, very adjustable. Works with a variety of devices. It swings out for transfers. It does not fold. It has something called a quick shift lever or tool adjustment. So if we want someone to be able to change the position of any of these joints quickly, we can recommend the quick shift levers. If we don't want someone messing with it, we can use a tool adjustment where an Allen wrench is required. It holds up to 6.6 pounds, but if you get the Monty 3D Plus, it will hold up to 13 pounds. So if you're unsure about that, you can get the heavier version. And they have a special clamp here that you can see that has this little lever on it, and it helps prevent the pin from slipping because Readapt, like Daisy, has this little pin and holes, and that can be a problem again with tilt. So this locks it out. Want to see another video? I want to see another video. Let's check this out. And there is no audio on this video, but you can read along. And this video is of that Monty 3D. And it's showing how there are different positions available. So this is exiting. It gets it mostly out of the way for transfers, but doesn't make the chair tippy. And even though it doesn't fold, you can swing it not to the side, but all the way back towards the chair. And this means that it's less likely to tip over. So it's a nice feature. And then we move on to mounts for smaller SGDs, speech generating devices. These are smaller in dimension and weight. So the mount itself doesn't weigh as much. It's just not as bulky. If a client uses excessive force against their device or the mount, then a heavier mount may be indicated. And generally, there's not quite the height that's available for these as there are in the heavier mounts, like for eye gaze. So CJT has something called the TBO, and it holds lightweight devices, you can see here, and it attaches to a variety of equipment, and it's smaller and lighter than our standard mounts. Daisy has the M series, and this includes their mini adjustable mount, the mini folding, and the mini rigid, which has a bent tube but no adjustment within the tube itself. So this is smaller and lighter than standard mounts, but it is heavier than most of the other mounts in this category of supporting lighter weight devices. It will hold up to 10 pounds, which is still a lot. So it really makes it difficult to imagine ordering a heavier mount from Daisy, since these will hold so much. Really, the main reason you would need to is to get that height. There are 3 different versions. Again, the folding, the rigid, and the adjustable one. Again, still a little heavy. And then Readapt has this hybrid 3D. It holds up to 4 pounds. They have an L3D for light, and it holds up to 2.6 pounds. So this is smaller and lighter than standard mounts. And again, you can order this with these quick shift levers that you can see in this picture, or you can order it with tool adjustment instead. There is a super clamp that's available for unusual sizes, but it's not going to hold as well as a traditional frame clamp that you adjust with a tool. Now, for a lighter device, this might be okay. And if you are looking to mount on something else, like the Riften activity chair, like the Riften gait trainer, like a walker, you are most likely going to need a very lightweight mount, and if it'll support the device. And you might need this super clamp, partly so you can get it on and off easily, and partly just to accommodate unusual sizes. Remember though, if you are using this on a walker or a gait trainer, you are introducing weight in an area that maybe it wasn't designed to support. And that, especially on a walker, can sometimes lead to tipping. There are, through this particular mount from Readapt, device adapters and mounting plates for most of our lightweight SGDs, including tablet-based devices. And this is a 2-tube version rather than the 3 tubes that we see on the mounts for heavier devices. So we lose one of those points of articulation. Usually that's okay because this isn't mounted too high up. So mounting systems for heavier devices typically are for SGDs weighing 5 or more pounds. It also can be used for eye gaze systems because they need to be mounted higher up. And mounting systems for the smaller SGDs are typically lighter weight, less bulky. It's important to consider all these features so that we can meet someone's individual needs for sure. And I'll open it up for questions again before we move on to mounts for computers and tablets and smartphones and all that fun stuff. We'll have some time at the end for questions as well. I'll make sure I don't miss anyone here. Great. Well, I must be covering this very, very well, or you're getting very, very tired. So grab a piece of chocolate, hang in there, shake it off, and we're going to keep moving along. Okay, then we have mounts for computers, tablets, and smartphones. So mounting a notebook or a laptop computer, some of these mounting manufacturers do support notebook computers. Typically, it's a tray support. And then we need to either rest the computer directly on the tray, or there might be some sort of strap that goes around the computer underneath the display to support it in that location. Oh, so I'm going to go back for a second because we just have this one picture of the mountain mover tray. But again, several of our manufacturers make these sort of tray-based systems. So instead of that mounting plate that attaches to a device, we have a tray for these computers to rest on. And the manufacturers who make these are in your handout. There are many, many tablet mounts that are out there. Some do not offer adequate positioning options or do not maintain the position well. So I'm not going to go over these. I know someone mentioned earlier about RAM mounts and various options. You can go on Amazon and find all sorts of stuff, and they are significantly cheaper. However, again, hard to get the device for a tablet or smartphone in the exact placement required and get it to stay there. So if people want to try those out, they certainly can. There are also mounting manufacturers that can support a tablet, but the mount is really over-engineered for it. It's very large, bulky, heavy, and it may be a lot more costly than some of the other options available. So Mountain Mover does have tablet and smartphone mounting. So here we can see a tablet to the right side of this picture and a smartphone on the left. This is a pretty bulky, heavy, expensive mount to hold these two, but it does allow them to be placed exactly where this person needs and to adjust that placement using that hoop or their power adjustment or to get it completely out of the way. Readapt also has tablet and phone mounts. And they have, again, the option of those quick shift levers or a tool adjustment. They have a frame clamp that fits most frames, but they also have that super clamp if we need to place this in a less typical position. They have a lot of different tablet and phone mounts, but they also have some universal mounts, but they do hold their position very well. So this is an example on top of a mount for a tablet. There's also support for the eye gaze bar below. And then in the lower picture, there's a mount for a smartphone. And you can put kind of like an outrigger on some of these Readapt mounts so you can hold more than one at the same time. Stealth Products has some tablet and phone mounts. They have different links that can be added or removed to achieve the right position in height and length. There's adjustable mounting plates for various size tablets and phones. They do swing out of the way. These are rather heavy, and some of them are pretty bulky for the task. And they really do only offer these universal plates, which usually work pretty well, not always as well as something that's designed for that particular device. If you could see my cursor here, this particular one is probably their most streamlined mount. It's not as heavy or on the eyes or on the weight. Therafin, which is recently partnered with Ultimate Medical, has a couple mounts. They call this their communication mount, but it does not support a speech generating device. It does support tablets and phone mounts. And if you're using a tablet for communication, then you do have your communication on board. You can mount this on the frame, under the armrest, under the seat cushion, or on a tray. So they have a lot of unique options. They tend to be a little on the bulky side, but they do have a number of these options available. Something that's important to keep in mind with these various companies too is if we're able to get funding for these, the supplier has to order it from a company that can accept that funding. So the supplier can't order from Amazon. They have to order from something like Readapt or Therafin or one of these other companies. So we can mount on some of these manufacturer systems more than one device. And that's really nice because we're probably finding this more and more, right? That people are using multiple systems throughout their day. So big question, can you get funding for a tablet mount or a smartphone mount? If this is being used for communication, yes. But most of the time, no. And so the family's either going to have to come up with self-pay. They might want to look at some of those Amazon options as long as it provides the support that they require and the durability and the exact placement. So in summary, there's a wide variety of mounts on the market. it's important to be aware of which mounts are appropriate for heavy duty or heavier, not heavy, heavier communication devices. And when we're accessing via eye gaze, lighter communication devices, speech generating devices, notebook computers, tablets, and smartphones. And we have to be aware of the specific product features so that we can match that to someone's needs. Just like everything else in our field, there is not one mount that's better than the other. There is a mount that best matches your client's needs. So take home message, mounting assistive technology devices to wheelchair frames provides access to the device from any location the client is seated in the mobility base. So no matter where they are, home, school, community, they have that access. Assessment determines those specific requirements for the client, for the device, for the mount. And these requirements are then matched to product features. Definitely this takes teamwork. It takes some effort. It might take setting aside an afternoon with a mount and the team and just playing around with it till everyone's very, very comfortable with all aspects of the process, from ordering to mounting it. All right, so I'm going to open up for questions. And while people are typing, I do want to say thank you very much. I really do appreciate everything you're doing for all of these people you're working with and for taking the time to continue to learn, because it's certainly something we have to do in our field. Things keep changing. And I want to make sure you have my contact info. This is my email and my website. And my website has some helpful resources under the resources tab that you're welcome to access. It's all free. So with that, I'm going to see if we have any questions. I'm going to move this chat box where I can reach it a little easier. All right. So Corinne has said you have recommendations for mounting eye gaze device on a Riften activity chair with a tilt. It can be tricky because of what is available on the frame in terms of being able to put that frame clamp, and you're going to need a mount that can achieve that height. And that super clamp might work, but that's a lot of leverage to put on that clamp. I probably wouldn't do that. I would recommend contacting a group like Readapt, send them some pictures of the child in the Riften activity chair, holding the device where you want, and say, do you have anything that will connect to this and where? And they will tell you if it will work or not. So that's what I would recommend. The other option is, while the person's in the Riften activity chair, since they are not going anywhere at that time, it's not really a movable, there is a mobile version of it, but chances are the client's just there for a little bit. You could use a rolling mount, which we didn't have time to cover today, but there are rolling mounts that work well for over bed. And sometimes in situations like this, they also work well for evaluation because you can put that device where you need to. Jenny has said, my student has a donated wheelchair and the only place I can mount is the footrest, but it loosens often. What I would recommend, again, Jenny, just because of limited time here, is that you, again, maybe contact a company like Readapt, take a picture of where you want that device in relation to the client in the chair. And then they might be able to come up with a solution other than the footrest. They don't like mounting them there either. So they might have a solution that will work on that donated chair. If, as an aside, if this person needs a chair of their own, if that donated chair isn't meeting their needs, depending on funding, there are certainly other options they could pursue. So it might be good to look at referral to a seating and mobility clinic in the area. Brian has said, Riften did also recently release a new universal mounting adapter. I'll have to take a peek at that, Brian. Is it for, do you know if it's for a mounting system like the ones we've been talking about, or is it for something else? I would like to look at that. And Corinne has said, the classroom's too small for those rolling mounts. That's a challenge. Do you recommend the rolling mount with small base available from CJT? I'm worried it could tip. We've used the footrest before, but the new chair has a footplate that won't accommodate the frame clamps we've used in the past. Oh, I see what you're saying. So yeah, for the Richmond activity chair, there's it's a whole different footrest situation than a manual wheelchair, but it's not very conducive to frame clamps. So again, I'd reach out and see if they have anything, or look into that universal mount system that Brian mentioned, that universal mounting adapter. That'd be interesting. I'm going to go look at that myself. All right. And Elizabeth has said, with the quick release frame clamp from Readapt, am I correct that the bar that goes into the clamp needs to be vertical? Is having it at an angle unstable? If you, the Readapt does have that little pin and hole, but they have the locking clamp. So does Daisy. And so with either of those, you can put it at quite an angle. If you need to go really horizontal with that bar that usually would be vertical, I would recommend looking at CJT. They're really designed for unusual placements. And finally, Emma has said, I have a student whose speech generating device was not ordered with a mounting plate. Are companies able to provide mounting plates after the device has already been obtained? Absolutely. So you can order these parts separately. And thanks, Brian, for sending that link for that adapter. I'm going to copy the link myself right now. Great. Okay. Well, let's see. We are after our time, so I want to respect your time. So I'm going to let Claire take us on out of here. And if you have more questions, you can email me.